The Oakland Athletics weren't very good in 2024, but they were pesky. Is there any hope for them in 2025? I'll be discussing that and more on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we're your number one source of fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Dominic Martino, riding solo today. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already, hit that little bell below. It will subscribe you to the channel and give you notification every time we drop a new episode. And if you're listening on a platform like Apple or Spotify that allows 5-star ratings and reviews, I would truly appreciate it if you could do that for us. And lastly, most importantly to Matt and I, give us a chance on the Subtext platform. Through Subtext, it's an in-depth personalized experience through text messaging alerts right to your phone, offering so much more than we can in this 30-minute podcast. And in the off-season, we're going to be having so much fun on Subtext. We have rankings coming very soon. I've been working diligently on those to get those guys out to you. And just like Dynasty Keeper questions, we're really going to be only answering those on Subtext this off-season. So if you are interested, the link is in bio for our Subtext. And this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. And all right, guys, we're talking about the Oakland Athletics today. They're an interesting team, man. So this was officially the last season for Oakland in the Coliseum. They're going to be playing in a minor league stadium in Sacramento, and they're headed to Vegas in a few years. I believe it's at least 3 years in the minor league stadium for the Oakland Athletics. And then, the plan is to move on to Vegas. I don't think they have an official deal for a stadium or anything like that. So it's a lot of things still up in the air. The fan base is very, very disappointed in the way things were handled with the Athletics this year. They did finish fourth in the AL West, ahead of the Angels. Athletics had a 69-win, 93-loss record. As I mentioned, though, they were very pesky. They scored a lot of runs. They had a lot of, double-digit run games. The new Bash brothers, who we'll get into, Brent Rooker and Lawrence Butler. We're going to talk about them in a bit. But, when I'll be doing these team reviews, I like to talk a little bit about how the team, as a whole did and that kind of stuff at the top. And then we'll get into the bats. But, really, with John Fisher, fans are really mad at the owner, John Fisher, and it's just going to be interesting to see how the future shapes for this team. Still called Oakland Athletics, like I said, for a couple more years, then officially off to Vegas. So we'll see. But you know what? Let's get into a couple of names. We'll have a little bit of fun here. We'll talk about the bright spots. Brent Rooker, great year for Brent Rooker. Honestly, was an all-star in 2023, but had an even better year in 2024. This year for Brent Rooker, 145 games, 546 at-bats, 82 runs with 26 doubles and 2 triples. He hit 39 bombs, had 112 RBIs, 11 steals, 59 walks to 177 strikeouts, and a 293 batting average. So with Brent Rooker, I'll say this. I don't think the batting average is real. I think on any given season, Brent Rooker's 29. He's 29 years old, by the way, so he will be 30 next year. I could see Rooker being more of like a 255, maybe a 260 batting average guy. The pop is real, though. He has a lot of pop in that bat. He hits the ball really, really hard. Showed us it in 2023, showed it again this year. 35, 40 home runs in the cards next year with a lot of RBIs for sure. The sprint speed, on the other hand, for Rooker, about average. So the steals are really, I think it's going to depend on if Oakland's letting him run, if he wants to run. We saw the 11 steals this year. Wouldn't expect double-digit steals from him, but can he chip in, 5 next year? Yeah, I don't think he's a 0 in the category. And I mentioned the batting average is something I don't think is super sticky as well. I think he should be drafted like a Kyle Schwarber-ish type player next year. So will he be maybe top 24 outfielder, maybe like a low-end outfielder number 2, high-end outfield number 3? It really just depends on the hype, where the hype goes, because Like I said, the power's real. But is he gonna have 112 RBIs again next year on this Oakland team? Like I said, they're pesky. Scored a lot of runs. Shriley's gonna show in that RBI total here for Rooker and Butler. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm buying into that. I don't know how much I'll be drafting him next year. Like I said, if I can get him as my outfield number 3, I'm more in on it. 2, if you have great batting average, if you took batting average early and steals, and you just need a guy that has a lot of pop, because that's real, for sure. But I don't want to keep saying the same things here with Rooker, So with that being said, let's move on to the other, new Bash brother. Let's talk about some Lawrence Butler. Butler was a guy Matt and I kind of differed on. For a while, I was kind of buying in where Matt was kind of taking the step back. I was telling you guys to pick him up. Matt was saying to wait. I think it just panned out with a guy like Butler. He gets really hot at times, and you kind of got to ride those hot stretches. And he's a guy that it's tough when you drop him, right? Because if you rode that first hot wave and dropped him when he, cooled off, he had another one towards the end of the season that was just as good. And, I know helped me win a championship actually against Matt, ironically. So, guys, sound off in the comments about that one because, Matt will get a good laugh out of that one. But, on the year, in 2024 for Lawrence Butler as a 23-year-old, 125 games, 412 at-bats, 63 runs, 24 doubles, 2 triples, 22 homers, 57 RBIs, 18 steals, 35 walks to 108 strikeouts, and a 262 batting average. Now, Butler's young, and he's actually learning from a guy like Rooker, too. I'm sure he's helping him, figure out that power stroke, which he's, doing really well with. Butler in the minors, actually hit for a, good amount of decent batting average, 273, 265, 284 in the minors for Butler over the last 3 years. And even if you look at the underlying stuff for Butler, they're saying a 265 batting average is kind of sticky, hits the ball really hard, barrels it up well. Another guy who's a middle of the pack with sprint speed, though. So, he actually did steal, a lot of bases in the minors, too. He had a 29 steal season and a 21 steal season. Actually, the 29 steals were only 102 games. So, it does show the willingness to steal with Butler, and a lot of stealing is just the willingness to, just steal and just wanting to get those, stolen bases in. So, it could be a double-digit stolen base guy going forward. I'm not necessarily predicting a step forward in that category because he's not super fast. So, I don't think, Oakland or any other team would just let him run rampant. But can he steal 15 bags? For sure. But can he hit 35 home runs? I think that's definitely in the cards for Lawrence Butler going forward, the young 23-year-old. So I think Rooker and Butler, I think Rooker will definitely be going higher for sure, but I might prefer the price on Butler because if the price on Butler is, like a utility bat or, a mid-tier number 3 outfielder, I think that's a great spot to get a guy whose upside I don't think we've seen. And with a Brent Rooker, I think we've seen the upside. I think the 2024 year for Brent Rooker is going to be his career year. I think next year those stats come down for Rooker, and I think the stats next year go up for Butler. So that's going to be fun, but I do think they're both going to be useful in fantasy, and I both think they're going to be, useful for the Oakland Athletics next year. Let's sneak in one more guy here. Let's talk a little bit of Shea Langeliers. Shea Langeliers was somebody higher end prospect, especially when it goes to catchers. Last year, but Langeliers had a good season with 137 games played, 482 at-bats, 58 runs, 18 doubles, 2 triples, 29 homers, 80 RBIs, 4 steals, 41 walks to 145 strikeouts, and a 224 batting average. A lot of games played for a catcher, a lot of home runs for a catcher. Definitely going to be a top 10 guy. Could be, I might not even want to argue with you if you're going to take Shea Langeliers as a top 5 catcher next year. Has a lot of pop, which is real. And, 80 RBIs, man. I told you, those Oakland Athletics, man, they get on base. They, they steal a little bit. They're just a pesky team. And I think with the right management and ownership, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, they really could have been a lot better than they were this year. And if, they spent a little bit of money, there's some, I think there's a core. I think there's a core here. And I think Langeliers can be a very good part of it. He's only 26 years old. And just another guy, the power is legit. And even the underlying stuff says that he might even be able to take a little bit of a step forward in batting average. So imagine instead of hitting 224, he hits 240 with 30 home runs. The runs and RBIs, man, it's just on the team to see where they're at next year. But it's going to be interesting. I do like Shea Langeliers a lot and was impressed with the step forward that he took from 2023 to 2024 because you know what? He went up 20 points of batting average. He hit more home runs, drove in more runs, just was better at pretty much everything. And just to see a young player like that who's in the midst of his prime do this, who was a higher end prospect, I think he could take another step forward next year, and then we might even be talking about him as a top 3 catcher going into 2026. So Shea Langeliers is definitely another Oakland player that I'm high on. I really do like him. But before we move on and talk about a couple more bats, the Oakland pitching staff, which was an absolute mess this year, we want to just make sure you stay locked on with us because those names and more are coming up next. And guys, I am talking about my friends over at Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka, Ellie, or Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, it's possible to score gem mins for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was from a hit last week on Arena Club Slab Pack Drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club Slab Packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After you pull cards that are revealed, they'll immediately be placed into your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent with full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out right now. You can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb and use the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb, code LOCKEDONMLB for 10% off your first purchase. And guys, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for your everyday to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And then once again, I want to talk to you guys about the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast Diamond Club on the Subtext platform, your ultimate fantasy baseball companion. As this offseason unfolds, you can rely on Matt and I for our dynamic content. You're going to get real-time alerts right to your phone, including ranking updates. Like I said, you're going to be able to ask us those keeper and dynasty questions. There's just going to be so much fun stuff. Matt and I are going to be giving out to our way too early sleepers, breakouts, and bust. We're going to have a lot of fun with these review episodes where we have some inside the detail stats and stuff like that. You guys are just going to love it, and it's going to be awesome. So, once again, make sure you check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast Diamond Club on the Subtext platform where the path to your victories begin. Subscribe now and elevate your fantasy baseball experience to a new level. All right, guys, jumping back in here with this Oakland team, I think that's the bright spots, right? I think we hit all of the bright spots, and we're going to have to get into some players that were a little bit disappointing and stuff like that. Let's start with Zach Geloff. I will say this. Matt was a huge Zach Geloff guy. I like Zach Geloff too. He really had a strong second half in 2023. Just didn't live up to the hype in 2024. And I'll be honest, he started moving down my rankings a lot coming into the 2024 season as I was deep diving him. Right, I knew the batting average wasn't something that was very sticky. As you looked into the underlying stuff, they didn't believe in it, and even in the minors, he had some successful batting average seasons, but it just wasn't really believable, right? So that's what also made me take a step back. The strikeout to walk ratio really crashed out. In the bigs this year with 38 walks for Geloff to 188 strikeouts. He only hit 211. The power and the speed were there, which we knew was going to be the 17 homers and the 25 steals were great. Lackluster 49 RBIs and 60 runs. He was hitting leadoff a lot. Then they started moving him around. Geloff's only 24. I'll be taking him at a discount next year. If you can really get him as a bench player, second base is going to be a tough position in 2025. So, like I said, there'll be times where I'll be taking Geloff if, it winds up being something where he's having a big spring training and the price moves up and he's inside like the top 10 second baseman. I don't think I'll be buying back in for that price because you know what? To me, a step forward for Geloff is 145 games played with maybe like 25-ish homers and 30 steals with a 240-ish batting average, a lot of strikeouts, and that's useful. And that's great. That's like almost like a Spencer Steer type. So, and I know a lot of people are big on Spencer Steer, but I'll talk about him more if I wind up with the Reds. If not, I'll talk about him more as we get deeper into the offseason. But Geloff, I can definitely see him being useful if the price is right. There is upside for the 24-year-old. Just the batting average scares me off a lot. And then being on the Oakland team, the runs and the RBIs aren't really necessarily guaranteed to be a plus. Even when they were super pesky this year, 60 runs and 49 RBIs isn't really, blowing me away. So with Geloff, like I said, if this I'll be buying in 2025. If not, you know what? We can leave him for somebody else. Let's talk about another interesting guy that was, had a lot of injuries, stuff like that. Estuary Ruiz. I was big on Ruiz when he was in the minors, man, coming up with the Padres. He was stealing a lot of bases. He even showed off some pop. I want to talk about that season in the minors real quick because if you don't know what Ruiz did in the minors a couple years ago, it was a crazy season, right? So listen to this for Estuary Ruiz. In 2022, in the minors, 114 games played, 437 at-bats, 114 runs, 33 doubles, 2 triples, 16 homers, 65 RBIs, 85 steals, 66 walks to 94 strikeouts, and a 332 batting average. I don't think that's the player he'll ever be, but let's go over his 2023 numbers in Oakland, right? He's 24 years old, played 132 games, had 449 at-bats, had 47 runs, 24 doubles, a triple, 5 homers, 47 RBIs, 67 steals. He had 20 walks to 99 strikeouts, and he had 254. Injury plagued year for Ruiz this year, 29 games. Really not even going to go over the stats because, didn't play enough for any of it to be relevant. If he is healthy in 2025, I don't think we're going to have to pay a dime for him. I think he'd be one of the last picks of our drafts, and you'll be getting a guy that I think will be hitting leadoff a lot for Oakland. I think he could hit anywhere from, I don't want to give you a crazy range, but is 240 to 260, right? I think in a good year, he could hit 260. In a bad year, he could hit 240. If he plays 150 games, we could maybe see something like 10 home runs, 80 steals. 80. I don't think 80 steals is out of the cards. Maybe 75 is more realistic, but he could definitely give you a huge leading steals type of number. If he leads off too when that team is rocking and rolling, right? I think Ruiz could have 85, 90 runs, RBIs 45, 50, nothing crazy, but he could be a very, very useful fantasy player that I don't think we're going to have to pay anything for next season. But you know what? The Oakland Athletics pitching staff mentioned that they had a really good closer last year, Mason Miller. We're going to talk about him. And then we'll get in some prospects, some owner talks, some, more Oakland Athletics talks. But make sure you stay locked on because all of that and more is coming up next. We're talking about my friends over at Booking.com. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rival cities. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Guys, I'm a Yankee fan. If you're not a fan of the podcast and you haven't watched, now you know. And I've been to Camden Yards. I always talk about that one a lot. And what a beautiful stadium, great cuisine. A lot of just fun stuff out there to do. And, with the use of Booking.com, you can make trips like that happen. So once again, use Booking.com, Booking.com, Booking.yeah. And then I need to talk to you about my friends over at FanDuel. With FanDuel, when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And not many platforms offer that these days. So FanDuel is going above and beyond for you guys. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Guys, once again, that's FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, guys. We're really bringing home the home stretch here, and we got to do it. Unfortunately, we got to talk about that really bad Oakland Athletics pitching staff. Man, it was abysmal this year. So Oakland actually finished with we talked about those Rockies the other day, if you were here with me. So the Rockies had the worst ERA in all of baseball. Oakland wasn't the worst. They were the sixth worst. They had a 4.37 ERA with 1,400 innings pitched. They really just weren't good this year, man. It was tough to watch. It was really bad. They didn't have anybody that was consistent. A lot of the starts, Joey Estes was bad. JP Sears was bad. It was tough to watch. It really was. They had Mitch Spence and JT Ginn, just guys that most of them we never heard of. Unfortunately, they did deal with a lot of injuries, though. They had some hope with guys like Osvaldo Bido was actually okay this year. Luis Medina is a young starting pitcher who I believe they acquired from I think it was Tampa. I believe it was Tampa. Ken Waldichuk, who I know they got from the Yankees, got hurt. So they did have some guys that, had some promise there. But as a whole, it was just tough. And I was going to say the stadium is a good part to pitch in, but you know what? They're leaving the stadium. So starting pitching, I think, is going to be a big problem. Going to be a big problem in 2025 for the Oakland Athletics. And they need to go out there and they got to acquire. They don't have, I said, if things spins right, I think one of the three of Bido, Medina, and Waldichuk might be a SP3 caliber guy. So even with that being said, they got to go out there and they got to acquire an ace. And, I guess let's transition it, because it's just tough. We'll kind of mix the bag here. So let's talk about Mason Miller then, right? As we're talking about the rotation, Mason Miller did close last year for the Oakland Athletics, but you know what? The flamethrower is in the mix for a starting pitching spot next year. Miller did come up through the minors as a starting pitcher and did start 6 games for the Athletics in, 2023, where he was, solid for them as well. But he's a dude that doesn't have like a big minor league track record. So I think Oakland just wanted to get innings under his belt, right? And he was dealing with injuries. He dealt with injuries in 2023. 2024 was kind to Miller. Let's go over the numbers with 65 innings pitched, 104 strikeouts, an 0.87 whip, a 2.94 ERA. That was across 55 games, and Miller had himself 28 saves. I like it. I personally, it's tough. I think he has all the talent to be a starting pitcher, but why rock the boat at this point? If the guy's having success as a closer, as a bullpen guy, it might not be the way to do it. I know the Yankees ruined, at least for their own good, a lot of starting pitchers by moving them back and forth. You think of the Jabba Chamberlains and the Ian Kennedys and guys like that. Even Phil Hughes, let's throw his name in there, right? it happens, man. You move guys around too much. It doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody is, John Schmaltz, where, he can do both successfully. And I think maybe we leave Miller alone in the bullpen. But you know what? He was an all-star this year. So we'll see what the plans are for Oakland. I'll be drafting him either way. If he's a closer going into 2025, I think he's easily a top 10 closer. If he's a starting pitcher, top 50. I don't think I'll be pushing the limits on him too much when it comes to where I'll be drafting him in 2025. When it comes to if he is a starting pitcher, because you know what, it might get a little bit crazy, and we don't know. We haven't seen it, right? We know what he can do in one, maybe two innings. What is he going to be able to do 5 or 6 now after taking a whole year off from starting? And even if they pick him up in the off season, it's going to be tough as we, Major League Baseball as a starting pitcher. We're going to see about 33 starts. Maybe it's 30. I mean, when I was coming, it was about 33, but maybe it's 30 starts. That's a lot of starts, man. For a guy who is, been the closer. So we'll see where things go with Mason Miller. Like I said, either way, I like him. Young, going to be 26 next year. Sky's the limit for the kid. Let's move into some prospects. Let's talk about Jacob Wilson. Jacob Wilson did get the call last year. Got a little bit of taste of how things are in Oakland. I know Matt and I were super excited about him. I was very excited about Jacob Wilson. And mixed bag. Got hurt, came back. I think he got hurt again, right? If I'm not mistaken. So we'll see where things end up for the kid. I think there's really a chance for Jacob Wilson to make the opening day roster. He played 28 games in the bigs this year with Oakland, 92 at-bats, 11 runs, 2 doubles, 2 triples, no homers, 3 RBIs, 8 walks to 10 strikeouts, which I actually love to see, and he hit 250. But let's talk about what Wilson did in the minors this year, because actually the numbers are mind-blowing. 53 games in the minors for Wilson, 208 at-bats. This is this past season. 48 runs, 28 doubles, no triples, 7 homers, 39 RBIs. He stole 2 bags, and he hit 433. So this is how we look at Jacob Wilson. I think he's a guy, he's got a lot of pop, not a lot, got a good amount of pop, over 20 home run guy, but I think batting average is going to be something he's really good at. He knows how to take a walk, doesn't strike out a crazy amount. For a kid that's only 22 years old, it's really nice to see that, he was able to keep that plate discipline good. And like I said, he got a bad shake. I believe he got hurt in the first game he got called up in, dealt with that injury, then came back and, finished the season okay. In the bigs, but let's see where Wilson is in 2023. Another guy that I don't think we're going to have to pay a lot for. I think it will be, almost a ND or bench type pick, for the young shortstop. He's 6'2", 190 as well, so he has a good frame on him. So you know what? Let's just see where things go with Jacob Wilson, because he's another guy heading into 2025 that I do think is sneaky good, and I do like where the prospect pedigree and things land for him. We could talk about a couple things real quick. So the underlying stuff, we don't have too much, data there, but he did look good for batting average. He was squaring up the ball a lot, wasn't whiffing, wasn't striking out. As I mentioned, the fielding stuff looked good. We'd love to see him take a step forward in the power, but, like the underlying stuff for the power. So we'll see where that goes, because he didn't hit a home run in the bigs through his, short time there. And he's not super fast, sprint speed, mediocre for Jacob Wilson. But, like I said, he's somebody that I'm a little bit excited about. And I think I'll have a few shares of him, because I don't think it will take much to get him on your team. Let's move on to this last guy. Let's talk about Nick Kurtz. He is one of the top prospects in the Oakland Athletics system. And he actually had a really, really strong showing in 2024, right? He's actually the number 2 prospect in the system, and he's a big 6'5", 240 burly dude, good muscle on him, 65 power grade, and a 65 hit grade. So this is a kid that, can just hit the ball. And guess what? He did in the minors across 2 levels, across A-ball and AA. He hit 368. It was only 12 games, but in those 12 games, he actually had 4 homers and 14 runs, 13 RBIs, and 12 walks, 10 strikeouts. He had a walk a game. I mean, I wasn't super familiar with Kurtz before this episode. As I started prepping, I saw these numbers, and I was just overwhelmed by how good this kid is. So he's a big first baseman. I think he's somebody we need to keep our eyes on. I don't think the debut's necessarily in line for 2025, but you know what? If you play in those keeper and dynasty leagues, Nick Kurtz is definitely somebody I'd want on my team. I'll tell you that much. So he was just drafted this past year in 2024. So unless you had your first year player drafts already, he probably wasn't available. But he's somebody I'd be targeting, man. Out of all those boys that were drafted in 2024, he's one of those guys that I'd really be targeting, because just the way that he's translated already across two levels. I know we have the Charlie Condons and the Travis Bazanas. But Kurtz just already looks like he's a step ahead of both of those guys. But with that being said, Oakland, disappointing year for them. John Fisher, you got to do better. You got to be better. I think you have a lot of young players on this team that look really promising. So it's a disservice to not only yourself, the team, but your fans. So I think we can do a lot better here when it comes to this team. Go out there and acquire some starting pitching. Just make this team work, because I think the bats are there. I think Miller's a great anchor in the bullpen. Maybe you need a couple more guys in the back there with him. So you may only be one decent bat, another bat and a couple good starting pitchers away. So Oakland, let's hope there's better things ahead. I really wish you fans the best out there, because I know you guys are suffering. But you know what? That's all I got for today. Shout out to our everydayers and listeners making Locked On Fantasy Baseball your first listen each and every day. After you give us your first listen, make your second listen Locked On MLB. Our boy Sully over there does a great job covering the league and the playoffs in a different way than we do. But guys, until next time, see ya.